Hi there, my name is Julia Heap and I'm curator at the City Museum Berlin for the Museum Village Düppel, a medieval open-air museum. I'm responsible for research and exhibition mainly, and I really enjoy my job because it combines archaeology, which I studied, with a look at the future and how to combine the past with the future and how we can learn from the past. On first sight, open-air museums are all about educating about the past. Archaeological open-air museums in particular often go back to the Stone Age, recreating a travel through time by recreating house models from archaeological excavations. Some open-air museums specialize on one specific time period, like our Museum Village Düppel on the medieval period. Ethnographic open-air museums, on the other hand, concentrate more on the recent past. So what makes open-air museums so predestined to help craft a more sustainable future? If you look at these plans from different open-air museums and parks, it's obvious that they are very green places. Hidden away in the stories of the past are different themes on sustainability. And in this talk, I will have four main topics, starting with natural biodiversity, going on to preserving the variety in crops and livestock, to natural building materials, and ending with craft and their resources. We did a little exhibition on biodiversity for the Museum Village Düppel, and there were two interesting results that came from our research for this exhibition. One was that biodiversity actually increased due to human impact. The Mesolithic forests were cleared for small-scale agriculture, meaning more habitats and an increase in biodiversity to around 1900, after which it started to decline very sharply. We also had a study done on different wild bee and wasp species, and the results were quite amazing. We have 102 different species living in the thatched roofs, in the clay ovens, and in open sandy ground, 15 of which are listed as endangered. Another great example on how open-air museums can help preserve natural biodiversity comes from Butser Ancient Farm in the UK. The rare-striped moth, seen here as a caterpillar, only feeds on the flowers of the mullein. As the habitats for these flowers is decreasing, the moths also have a hard time finding food. At Butser Ancient Farm, they started reseeding the flowers around the area together with a conservation officer from Butterfly Conservation. It was quite a success, as the numbers increased from 7 in 2017 to 78 in 2018. We have seen a couple of examples where open-air museums are shown to be excellent places for educating about and preserving natural biodiversity. However, open-air museums are also very important places for preserving the variety in crops and livestock animals, as well as agricultural techniques. These pictures show the Düppel rye in summer. It's a winter crop, so it was sown in October as part of our 3-field system. It was cultivated by the geneticist Professor Plache to be a very hardy and long-strawed variety. Another great example of how open-air museums can preserve old livestock breeds as well as agricultural techniques is the open-air laboratory Lauresham in Germany, part of the Weltkulturerbestätte Kloster Lorsch. For cultivating their fields, they use an old Swiss cattle breed, Rätisches Grauvieh. Like many livestock breeds, or older livestock breeds, they are quite rare. They were chosen due to their small size, as medieval cattle was a lot smaller than we are used to today. At the same time as preserving old livestock breeds, the open-air laboratory Lauresham is also doing great work on medieval ridge and furrow field systems. Using cultivation experiments, they discovered that ridge and furrow cultivation is a great risk management strategy. In wet years, the crop yield will be better on top of the ridges, whereas in dry years, the soil will retain the moisture longer in furrows between the ridges. So in extreme weather conditions, it is always possible to have at least some harvest. For more details, do tune into the EXARC open access session later on, as Klaus Kopp will present his research on ridge and furrow field systems. As houses in open-air museums predate all modern building materials, they are made entirely from natural resources. Especially wood and clay are increasingly being put forward as sustainable materials for the future. The image in the center shows an example of modern architecture using wood and rammed earth walls. On the same topic, I'm also very excited about the paper by Caroline Nicolay on mud huts or eco-houses, when archaeology meets sustainable architecture, which is scheduled in the EXARC Open Access Conference session later on. An example from the museum village Düppel can illustrate how the sustainable value of these materials can be communicated in an eye-opening way to the public. In 1972, the volunteers of the museum built their first medieval house. It was used until the mid-80s, when it was decided to be left alone. The upkeep and repairs were too expensive, as other houses had been finished by that time already. So it was decided to be left alone as an experiment, a long-term experiment. The decay was documented annually, and today there's hardly anything left. When standing in front of its remains with a group, it's always a real eye-opener to see that everything is compostable, everything returns to nature, there is no rubbish. Evidence from a Bronze Age settlement in Hessen, Germany, showed that the walls were made up of two daubed wattle walls with an insulating layer of hay in the center. Using modern formulae for the calculation of insulation values of houses, it was shown that the values for the Bronze Age walls were better than those of timber-framed or solid brick walls, a fantastic example of how lessons can be learned from the past. While communicating with the public on topics of sustainability is important, it is just as important to live what you preach. This means running your open-air museum sustainably. At the Museum Village Düppel, we have been planning a modern clay timber hemp building for some years. The process is painstakingly slow. So I read the abstract by Frances Hewson of the Scottish Cranach Centre on creating Scotland's most sustainable museum with some envy. I'm looking forward to more details in her talk during the EXARC Open Access session. The last theme of sustainability I will be touching on today concerns crafts and their resources. Open-air museums are filled with traditional craft practices. Through hands-on activities, the public can experience how long it took to create a piece of clothing, when all the different steps have to be carried out by hand, be it textile hemp or wool. Almost automatically, the value of resources and finished objects increases. So maybe next time in the shops, someone might stop and think twice before buying into fast fashion. Besides creating awareness for the value of resources and materials, open-air museums are living collections of craft practices. It is not possible to put craft expertise on a shelf. The only way to preserve it is to practice it and pass the tacit knowledge on from one person to the next. 10 out of 23 craft practices listed by the German UNESCO Commission as intangible heritage worth protecting are integral to most archaeological open-air museums. You can see the list here. Preserving crafts by passing it on is sustainability in action. Similar to plants and animals, practices can only be preserved through real-life action, cultivation, breeding and passing practices to the next generation. An example of this is the use of quicklime on a medieval building site at the Open-Air Museum Bernau-Tachow in Germany. The production of quicklime is on the official UNESCO list as a craft practice in danger of disappearing. Preserving it through practice helps to keep the craft alive. Like clay, Lime is also making a comeback as a modern building material, emitting 80% less CO2 in its production than concrete. Paired with hemp sheaf, the inner woody core of hemp stalks, hempcrete is created, a building material for the future. As a last slide, I would like to show the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Looking at the many different facets of sustainability, it becomes obvious that almost all of them can be found in the 4 themes mentioned. Here come some examples. Goal 1. Raising awareness on textile production and fair prices. Goal 2. Preserving the diversity of crops and livestock. Goal 3. Natural building materials for healthy living. Goal 4. Fun and hands-on education at open-air museums. Goal 9. Learning from the past. Traditional crafts as innovations. Goal 11. Exploring sustainable ways of building. Goal 12. Using agriculture responsibly, giving space to biodiversity. Goal 15. Preserving natural biodiversity. In conclusion, it is fair to say that open-air museums are indeed predestined to lead the way to sustainable revolution. The topics and themes are never theoretical. They don't have to be displayed as installations or as virtual reality. They are real and living. They can be experienced by eye, hand, ears, and nose. The learning experience is automatically multisensory, including an emotional depth, as interactions with real people, animals, and plants are part of each museum visit. Thank you very much for your attention, and do tune in to the X-Arc session on a sustainable revolution for open-air museums on the X-Arc YouTube channel.